Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're tracing a family tree unlike any you've seen before. Imagine mapping the lineage of your smartphone, not with people, but with other machines. Sounds wild, right?
Yeah.
Can an iPhone truly be related to an abacus? What if applying the core principles of biological evolution could actually unlock profound insights into how our human-made world has developed?
It's a really intriguing idea, isn't it? We're talking about a completely fresh lens through which to view innovation.
Right.
The insight here is to see technology not as these sort of isolated flashes of brilliance, but as a vast, interconnected, evolving web, much like life itself.
Okay.
And this begs the question, can we truly apply the same analytical framework to both biological organisms and the intricate machines we build? It's an interdisciplinary bridge that promises to redefine how we understand technological history and maybe even predict its future.
That's exactly the mission for this deep dive. We're exploring a fascinating report that takes phylogenetic principles, concepts like common ancestry, divergence, shared traits, and applies them to the evolution of human-built machines. We're going to distill the core nuggets of knowledge from this captivating idea, understand its power, and importantly, acknowledge its limitations.
Yeah, that's key.
Our goal is to give you a shortcut to being truly well-informed on this perspective. So get ready to see your gadgets, your cars, even your humble toaster in, an entirely new light. So to begin, let's make sure we're all on the same page about biological phylogenetic trees. They're really the blueprint for this whole conceptual leap, so understanding them is pretty fundamental.
Absolutely. Think of biological phylogenetic trees as visual hypotheses, almost like, detailed family albums for living things. At their heart, they illustrate how different species or groups have evolved from common ancestors, branching out through what biologists call divergence events.
Okay, branching events.
Yeah, every branch point on one of these trees signifies a shared ancestor, and everything that stems from that point is related through that common lineage. It all goes back to Darwin's principle of descent with modification, the idea that life forms change over generations, inheriting characteristics, but also adapting and evolving new ones.
And when biologists map these trees, what traits are they really looking for? Is it just any characteristic like, having fur?
Not just any, no. It's very specific. We're hunting for derived traits. These are the new features that actually evolved within a particular family line, something distinct from their ancestors.
Okay, new stuff.
Right. But even more powerful are what we call shared derived traits, or synapomorphies. These are like unique family heirlooms passed down through specific branches, proving a direct shared connection from a recent common ancestor.
Like a family secret only you guys know.
Kind of. Imagine discovering a very specific genetic marker that only your family line and no other possesses. That's a synapomorphy in action, revealing deep evolutionary connections.
That makes perfect sense. So like how our own forelimbs are related to, say, a bat's wing, even though they do totally different things.
Exactly. That's a classic example of homologous traits. These are characteristics that different species possess because they inherited them from a common ancestor.
Right.
Now, the cool thing is, even though these traits might serve vastly different functions, like a human arm for manipulation, a whale's flipper for swimming, or a bat's wing for flight, they all share a remarkably similar underlying bone structure.
Wow.
That shared structure is the telltale sign of a common ancestor, even if their modern functions are miles apart.
This is where the analogy really begins to intrigue me. If we're looking for inherited traits in machines, what would they even be? How do we find that common ancestor structure in something like, say, a computer or a washing machine? It seems so different from a bone structure.
That's the crux of it, isn't it? Translating biological concepts into a technological context. In biology, we often look at genetic sequences, the literal DNA blueprint. For technology, we need an analogous molecular marker. The report suggests that core functional principles, fundamental design elements, or specific technical solutions could play this role. These are the fundamental units that can be inherited and modified across generations of artifacts.
Can you give us a concrete example? Like what would be a gene sequence for a machine?
Well, think about something as foundational as a gear mechanism or an electric motor. These aren't just parts. They represent fundamental solutions to mechanical or power problems.
Okay, like basic building blocks.
Exactly. They've been reused, adapted, and recombined in countless machines throughout history, from a grandfather clock to a wind turbine. Just as a gene sequence can undergo mutations or be recombined, a specific mechanical principle or a functional module can be tracked across different artifacts, revealing its modifications and adaptations over time. So a robust technophylogenetic tree would define its molecular markers as these inheritable, reusable, and adaptable technical components or underlying scientific principles. It's about seeing the deep common ideas that persist.
This is where it truly gets exciting. If biological evolution has its genes and mutations, what are the analogous units in technology? What gets inherited and modified when we're talking about, say, the evolution of a vacuum cleaner?
And this immediately raises a fascinating question. How do we define the technological equivalent of a gene, something inheritable? It's about defining technological molecular markers.
Right.
Take the electric motor again. It's a fundamental solution that, once conceived, became a core component, a gene, if you will, passed down and adapted for everything from blenders to electric cars.
Yeah.
The report frames technology broadly as the incorporation of knowledge into physical artifacts that can be used to solve problems, and its evolution simply as the change in these artifacts over time.
Okay. Knowledge into artifacts.
Yeah, this view highlights that technological evolution is a dynamic interplay between human knowledge, how it's embodied in physical objects, and the continuous process of problem solving. It's not just a collection of inventions, it's an active learning system.
So this isn't just some academic exercise in categorizing things. This perspective on how technology changes actually has profound impacts on societies and markets, doesn't it?
Absolutely. This proposition is central to understanding how industries rise and fall, how products gain or lose market share, and how societies themselves are transformed. A critical distinction here, and one we'll definitely explore more deeply, is the role of intentionality. Biological evolution is often considered a blind process, driven by natural selection acting on random variations.
Right, the random part.
Technological evolution, by stark contrast, is fundamentally propelled by the purposive intelligence of designers. The variations we see in technology are rarely random. Inventors actively learn from past designs, they experiment, they visualize.
So they're aiming for something.
Exactly. This means that both variation and selection operate in a much more targeted manner in technology. New technological alternatives are introduced through the recombination of new and existing components. Think of it as a form of directed mutation. And selection is driven by the fit between a technological variation and the performance needed by users and other selecting stakeholders, a conscious form of selection. This directedness adds a rich layer to the analogy, emphasizing how human foresight and deliberate problem-solving shape the evolutionary trajectory.
Interesting.
Plus, a concept like horizontal gene transfer, which we'll discuss later, is way more prevalent in technology, making the tree more like a network.
A network.
Oh, okay.
That changes things. All right, let's truly delve into these analogies because this is where the theory takes shape. We have this incredible framework from biology, but how do we map each piece onto the world of machines? Let's walk through some of the core biological concepts and discover their technological counterparts.
This is indeed the heart of the analytical framework. It's about drawing direct conceptual parallels, but just as importantly, understanding where those parallels might stretch or, diverge a bit.
Let's start with the common ancestor. In biology, it's the very root of the tree, right? The ancestral lineage. What's its technological analog?
In technology, we see the common ancestor as a foundational idea or a core invention. The key distinction is that in biology, it's about shared genetic lineage. In technology, it's a shared conceptual origin or a fundamental principle.
Like the idea of counting itself.
Exactly. Take, for example, the very notion of computation or mechanical calculation. That idea serves as the foundational ancestor for every computing device that followed, from the simple abacus to today's supercomputers. It's the initial spark, the idea that ignites an entire technological lineage.
And divergence, or speciation in biology, that branching or splitting that leads to distinct new lineages.
Yeah.
How does that translate to machines? Is it like when Apple makes a new iPhone?
Sort of, but broader. That's what we call product branching or specialization. In biology, it's reproductive isolation that leads to new species. For technology, it's driven by deliberate design choices or market forces that lead to new product categories or specialized variants. Consider the early computer. It didn't remain a single monolithic entity. It diverged, branching into, say, scientific calculators for researchers, then business mainframes for corporations, and later, the personal computers we know today. Each branch specialized to serve different user needs and market segments, driven by human decisions and market demand.
And what about a shared derived trait or synapomorphy? That new characteristic that evolves in one lineage and is then passed down to its descendants, like everyone in that family has it.
In technology, that's a shared design principle, or a feature. Biologically, it's a trait stemming from a mutation that becomes common within a clade. Technologically, it's a novel design element or a functional characteristic introduced in an ancestral artifact that is then inherited by subsequent models or categories.
Like the mouse.
The graphical user interface, the GUI, is a perfect illustration. Once pioneered, it wasn't just a one-off. It became a defining, shared-derived trait for virtually all modern operating systems, fundamentally changing how we interact with computers and defining a whole new clade of human-computer interaction. It was an innovation that was then inherited and refined by countless digital descendants.
So following that, what's a homologous trait in the machine world? Like the human arm and a bat wing, similar underlying structure, different functions.
The technological analog is an inherited design element, or a functional module. While biological homology is about similar structure due to common genetic ancestry, technological homology refers to a component or design pattern that's reused across different artifacts because of a common design lineage, even if it's adapted for new functions.
Like a wheel.
The humble lever or the wheel are ancient foundational examples. They are fundamental solutions that persist and are adapted in everything from a child's toy to massive cranes, showcasing their deep common design lineage. Another example is that very gear mechanism or electric motor we discussed. Their fundamental principles are inherited, even if their specific application varies wildly.
Then we have natural selection, which in biology is all about differential survival and reproduction based on environmental fit. What's selecting for technology? Is it just what sells best?
That's market selection or user adoption. And yes, what sells is a big part, but it's more nuanced. The crucial distinction here is that while biological selection often appears as a blind process, technological selection is explicitly not blind.
Right, the intentionality again.
Exactly. It's about success or failure based on market acceptance, user needs, economic viability, and broader social factors. Products don't just randomly survive, they succeed because they deliberately meet a demand, are affordable, or offer a superior experience. Think of how bicycle designs evolved. The early hobby horses were fun, but designs that incorporated pedals and chain-propelled wheels gained dominance due to their vastly superior performance and utility.
Ah, okay. So people chose the better design.
That was a clear market selection for a more efficient and practical design, driven by conscious user needs.
And the variation or mutation in biology, which is random genetic change, becomes something much more deliberate in our machines.
Precisely. It's innovation or recombination. In technology, it's about intentional design changes, often achieved through the thoughtful recombination of existing and new components or through radical invention. It's not a random genetic drift. It's a human thinking process designers learning from past iterations, experimenting, and consciously trying to improve or invent something new.
Like adding a camera to a phone.
Exactly. The continuous evolution of smartphones, adding cameras, GPS, new apps, illustrates constant innovation and recombination. Each new model is a deliberate variation.
And retention, or inheritance. Passing genetic material to offspring in biology. What sticks around in tech?
That's design retention or standardization in technology. It's the deliberate reuse, standardization, or propagation of successful designs, knowledge, and manufacturing processes. For example, once the basic QWERTY layout for keyboards was established, well, love it or hate it.
It stuck around.
It largely stuck around. Those fundamental features were retained and standardized across almost all subsequent designs. This highlights the cumulative nature of technological progress, where successful ideas become the foundation for future development.
The ultimate evolutionary outcome, extinction for a species. What's the tech equivalent? VHS killing Betamax.
Exactly. In technology, that's market failure or obsolescence. It's the discontinuation of a product line or an entire technology due to a lack of demand, the emergence of superior alternatives, or strategic shifts by companies. The Betamax videocassette format, for instance, didn't survive because VHS offered a more compelling market proposition, leading to Betamax's obsolescence. It was a clear case of one technological lineage outcompeting another.
We briefly touched on gene or molecular marker earlier. What's the more detailed technological analog? What's the tech DNA?
It's a core technical principle or functional component. In biology, it's a unit of heredity, like a DNA or protein sequence. In technology, it's a fundamental inheritable technical solution or design module. Think of a specific algorithm like MP3 for data compression, or a particular type of sensor technology like CMOS sensors in cameras, or a user interface paradigm like swipe to unlock.
Okay, those specific bits of know-how.
Right. These are the building blocks, the fundamental solutions that can be recombined and adapted across different machines, becoming the DNA of a product line.
And a clade, which in biology is a group including a common ancestor and all its descendants. Like all mammals form a clade.
In tech, that's a product family, or category. It's a group of related products or technologies descended from a common design or conceptual ancestor. For instance, all smartphones could be considered a clade, clearly descended from early mobile phones and personal digital assistants, but also converging with music players and cameras.
Finally, convergent evolution, unrelated species, evolving similar traits independently, like wings on birds and insects.
The technological analog is parallel invention, or technological convergence. This describes similar solutions being developed independently by different inventors around the same time, or distinct technologies merging into a new one.
Like the light bulb, Edison and Swan.
That's the classic example of parallel invention. The incandescent light bulb simultaneously developed by both Thomas Edison and Joseph Swan. And the smartphone, merging a phone, a music player, a camera, and an internet browser, is the quintessential example of technological convergence.
It's clear that while these analogies are powerful for understanding, the details often differ significantly. Which leads us to a crucial question. How do we actually identify these shared derived characteristics, these synapomorphies, in tech systems? In biology, you said it's key for grouping organisms. Biologists work backwards from traits.
Precisely. But for technology, it's far more complex than just looking at a bone structure or a genetic sequence. The fluidity of derived traits in technology, especially due to the constant recombination of components and the direct influence of user needs, presents a significant analytical challenge.
How so?
Well, in biological evolution, a derived trait typically arises from a modification of an existing ancestral form, often through random genetic mutation. In technological evolution, however, the emergence of new traits is a much more complex process, often driven by the deliberate recombination of new and existing components. This is fundamentally different from random mutation. Moreover, the variation and selection mechanisms in technology are heavily influenced by environmental fit and direct adaptation to user needs. This means a derived trait in technology is rarely a random occurrence that is then selected for. It is frequently a deliberate engineering or design adaptation in direct response to identified market demands, functional improvements, or user requirements.
So this implies that identifying derived traits requires understanding the why behind the design, the intent, market pressures, user feedback. It's not just about the artifact itself, but the human decisions.
Exactly. This makes the working backward process, which is so central to biological phylogenetics, significantly more intricate in a technological context. It involves analyzing not just the technical characteristics of the artifacts, but also human decision-making processes, economic incentives, and evolving social dynamics. You have to be part historian, part engineer, part sociologist sometimes.
That brings us to how these trees are actually constructed in biology. You mentioned sophisticated methods like maximum parsimony, maximum likelihood, Bayesian inference, all relying heavily on genetic data. So if we have these incredible tools for biological trees, how do we even begin to feed a machine version of that data? What exactly are we measuring in an iPhone or a washing machine to put it on a tree?
That's a critical methodological hurdle. What this really means is that we need to either significantly adapt existing biological algorithms or, more likely, develop entirely new ones that explicitly account for intentional design, rapid recombination, and even parallel invention, all these things that are kind of unique to technology.
So a whole new math almost.
Potentially. This represents a significant, exciting area for future interdisciplinary research. For example, maximum parsimony seeks the tree with the fewest evolutionary changes. For technology, this could translate to minimizing the number of distinct design steps or component additions required to explain a product line's evolution.
Right.
But to do this, we need to define analogous data. We'd need to encode the presence or absence of specific functional features, like, has a touchscreen jack? Yes. or uses an internal combustion engine, yes, no, or quantify design parameters such as processing speed, battery life, or energy efficiency. The ultimate success of technophylogenetics critically depends on developing robust markers that accurately capture these technological traits and then adapting tree-building algorithms to account for the unique dynamics of human innovation.
It's a big ask.
We spent a good amount of time exploring these compelling parallels, but it's equally important, maybe more so, to highlight where the analogy between biological and technological evolution bends or even, breaks. The report points out some crucial distinctions that really test the limits of this comparison. You're absolutely right. Understanding these differences is just as important as understanding the similarities, because it informs how we should apply the phylogenetic lens without oversimplifying the unique complexities of technological development. We're aiming for insight, not a perfect one-to-one mechanistic translation. You have to know where the metaphor holds and where it doesn't.
The first, and perhaps most profound distinction is intentional design versus blind natural selection. In biology, evolution is often described as a blind process, driven by random mutations acted upon by natural selection. But machines aren't just popping into existence randomly, are they? There's a plan.
Precisely. This is arguably the most fundamental and frequently cited difference. Technical artifacts are the direct result of the purposive intelligence of designers, which fundamentally contrasts with biological species understood to have arisen from blind processes of natural selection. Unlike the random mutations that drive biological variation, variations in technology are rarely accidental. Inventors and designers actively learn from past experiences, conduct experiments, and conceptualize or visualize their creations long before they are physically realized. This means that the variations that are presented for selection are not produced by a mechanism that is entirely blind to their ultimate fate.
They have an end goal in mind.
Exactly. While technological change certainly involves variation and selection, these processes are clearly not blind or natural in the same sense as biological evolution. Human foresight, intention, and problem-solving drive the generation of new forms.
That's a huge difference.
Yeah.
And it leads directly to this idea of Lamarckian inheritance in technology, which always sounded a bit, wrong when I learned it in biology class. Acquired traits being passed on.
It's truly fascinating how this concept, largely discredited in biology, is a very real phenomenon in technology. In classical Darwinian biological evolution, acquired characteristics traits developed during an organism's lifetime due to environmental interaction are generally not inherited by offspring.
Right. You lift weights, your kids aren't born stronger.
Exactly. However, in technological evolution, improvements, modifications, or adaptations made to an artifact or design during its lifetime, for example, through iterative design cycles, user feedback, or engineering refinements, can be directly and intentionally incorporated into the next generation or subsequent designs.
So version 2.0 can directly build on lessons learned from version 1.0's failures or successes.
Precisely. This direct transmission of learned and acquired characteristics is strikingly analogous to the Lamarckian idea. The emphasis on recombination of existing components and the concept of path dependence further support this, as successful design elements and accumulated knowledge are deliberately carried forward, refined, and combined in new ways. This Lamarckian aspect means that technological evolution can be significantly faster and more directed than biological evolution, as successful adaptations can be immediately inherited and built upon.
So it's like one technology can directly share DNA with another, even if they're not direct descendants, like stealing good ideas. That really changes the shape of the tree we're trying to build.
It absolutely does. In biology, horizontal gene transfer, where genetic material is transferred between organisms that are not parent and offspring, is relatively rare, though it happens, especially in microbes. But in technology, it's common and direct.
How so?
Think of licensing agreements, where one company gains the right to use another's patented technology. Or reverse engineering, where a product is literally taken apart to understand and replicate its design secret.
Ah, yeah.
Or simply modular designs, where components like USB ports or specific software libraries can be easily swapped and adapted across different systems from different lineages. This direct and prevalent sharing across lineages makes a purely bifurcating tree-like structure less accurate.
So less like a tree, more like a web or a network.
Exactly. It leads to a more reticulated network-like tree structure rather than a purely bifurcating one for technology where distinct lineages can and often do merge.
This all brings us to a major methodological challenge. How do we define the unit of analysis? What constitutes a species or a lineage in technology? Is it the underlying knowledge, the physical artifact itself, or even the company that makes it?
This unit of analysis challenge is indeed significant, and different scholars approach it in different ways. It's a real headache sometimes. The literature identifies three primary candidates, each offering a distinct lens for analysis.
Okay, what are they?
First, techniques. This refers to the underlying knowledge and practices, the fundamental abstract concepts like the evolution of encryption methods or calculus.
So the ideas themselves.
Right. Second, artifacts. These are the physical objects themselves, a specific iPhone model or broader product categories like smartphones. Some researchers, like George Basalla and his work, explicitly liken artifact types to biological species.
The actual things.
Yep. And third, firms. These are the organizations responsible for innovation, development, and selection within the market. For example, tracing the corporate lineage of a car manufacturer like Mercedes-Benz or Mini, including their acquisitions and spin-offs.
And the choice of unit profoundly impacts the resulting tree, doesn't it? You'd get totally different pictures.
It absolutely does. If you focus on firms, your tree might depict corporate mergers, acquisitions, and strategic shifts. If the focus is on artifacts, it illustrates product models, generations, and their branching into specialized variants. If it's techniques, you're tracing the evolution of underlying scientific or engineering principles. What's crucial is that these units aren't mutually exclusive. They're often hierarchical. A firm's strategic decisions influence artifact design, which in turn embodies specific techniques. A truly comprehensive technophylogenetic analysis might need multiple layers or views, perhaps nested trees or complex network diagrams, to show these intricate interconnections, acknowledging the richness of the data. It's complicated.
Finally, let's talk about multidimensional selection pressures. In biology, natural selection is primarily about ecological fit, surviving and reproducing in your environment. But in technology, it's clearly far more complex than that. It's not just about whether the machine works.
You're right. The report highlights that technological evolution is shaped by a whole confluence of factors. There's the technology realist perspective, which focuses on intrinsic technical factors and performance enhancement. Think of the relentless pursuit of faster processing speed in computers, Moore's law kind of stuff.
Yeah, better performance.
Then there's the economic perspective, emphasizing R&D investment, economies of scale, and the market dynamics, like cost effectiveness driving the adoption of, say, a particular manufacturing process over another, even if the other is technically okay.
Cheaper is better.
Often, yes. The cognitive interpretivist perspective looks at how various actors, firms, users, even regulators understand and interpret technology. A classic example is Polaroid's decline, partly attributed to its ingrained understanding of instant film technology, hindering its adaptation to digital photography. They just couldn't see the world differently.
Wow, their own success trapped them.
In a way. And finally, the social constructionist perspective integrates broader social factors, network positions, power dynamics, and political influences, such as government regulations shaping vehicle emissions standards, which forces car companies down certain paths.
So selection events in technophylogenetic trees are a complex interplay of all these diverse factors. A technically superior product might fail because it's too expensive or people just don't get it, or it's socially unacceptable.
Exactly. What this suggests is that technological fitness isn't just about raw performance, it's also about market viability, user acceptance, and societal factors. This leads to diversified technological solutions responding to a range of varying needs in different regions or market segments. A product that is technically superior might fail to gain traction due to high cost, poor user experience, or resistance from established social structures. This complex confluence of pressures can lead to the success, stagnation, or even extinction of a technological lineage. Consequently, a comprehensive technophylogenetic analysis must account for these multidimensional selection pressures to accurately explain the branching patterns and evolutionary trajectories observed in human-built machines. It's a lens that forces us to look beyond pure engineering.
All right, so we've laid the groundwork for the theory and explored its unique nuances. Now, how do we actually build these techno-trees? Just like biologists collect characters or heritable traits, we need analogous traits for machines. What exactly are we looking for in a machine that we can map as an evolutionary trait?
This is where we shift from the conceptual to the truly practical side of technophylogenetics. For machines and technological artifacts, analogous traits can be identified across several crucial dimensions. The first are functional elements, which pertain to what the machine does. Exactly. Its intended purpose, its specific capabilities, or its core functions. For example, a chair provides seating, a washing machine cleans clothes, and a bottle opener opens bottles. It's important to distinguish between a primary intended function and perhaps an accidental or secondary function that might emerge later, like using a screwdriver as a pry bar.
Huh. Guilty.
Okay.
So that's what it does. What about how it does it?
That brings us to our second dimension, design attributes. These describe how the machine is designed, its structural organization, and even its aesthetic properties. A key concept here is product architecture, which refers to how a product's functional elements are organized into physical components.
Like how it's put together.
Right. This includes distinctions like modular architectures, where components are largely self-contained and interact via well-defined interfaces. Think of a PC where you can easily swap out a graphics card or add more RAM.
Oh.
Or integral architectures, where functions are shared by many physical elements, allowing for tight system optimization, but less flexibility. Like in a smartphone, if it's tightly packed, you can't easily swap parts. Even the overall design system, its flexibility, consistency, or how easily its parts can be combined, can be a design attribute we track.
And the third dimension, got to be the nuts and bolts, right?
The technical specifications, exactly. These are the measurable characteristics and precise properties of a machine. This includes material properties like strength, durability, weight, or electrical conductivity, or performance metrics such as speed, power output, or energy efficiency.
The numbers.
Pretty much. It could also encompass specific component details like the type of processor in a computer, the kind of engine in a car, or the resolution of a camera sensor. For instance, machine vision AI systems identify parts by detecting key quantifiable characteristics such as edges, textures, markings, and holes. Similarly, product taxonomy systems in e-commerce categorize products based on attributes like brand, color, size, and material. These are all objective, quantifiable traits that we can track and compare across different models or generations.
So then we're back to that tricky problem, distinguishing homology from analogy in technology. It's already tough in biology, but in machines, with all this recombination and parallel invention, it sounds even harder. Is a digital display in an early calculator and a modern smartphone homologous, meaning shared ancestry, or analogous, meaning they just evolved similar functions independently?
This is indeed a significant challenge, perhaps even more complex than in biology. In biology, differentiating homologous traits, shared ancestry, from analogous traits, convergent evolution, like the wings of a bird and an insect, is critical. In technology, it's far more nuanced.
Why is it harder?
Well, is that digital display an inherited principle passed down from the calculator lineage? Or did it just independently arise as the optimal solution for displaying numbers and later graphics in both contexts? The prevalence of recombination of existing components, where designers readily combine existing solutions in new ways, and the frequent occurrence of parallel invention, where the same invention is made independently by multiple inventors around the same time, further complicate this differentiation.
Right, like the light bulb example again.
Exactly. Edison and Swan patented the incandescent light bulb around 1880. Integrated circuits were developed independently by Jack Kilby and Robert Noyce in 1959. Even the jet engine was developed by both Hans von Ohain and Frank Whittle in the 1930s. And the electric motor had multiple independent developers. This highlights that similar solutions can arise independently to similar design pressures.
Wow, so a robust framework needs clear criteria, tracing not just artifacts, but the underlying ideas, knowledge, and problem-solving approaches. Because, as the report puts it, technology is fundamentally knowledge predominantly stored in artifacts. That's not just the thing, it's the idea behind the thing.
Exactly. It's about tracing the intellectual lineage, not just the physical one. A robust techno-phylogenetic framework must develop clear and consistent criteria to distinguish between traits that are genuinely inherited from a common design ancestor, that's the homology, and those that emerged independently to solve similar problems. That's the analogy or technological convergence. This means going beyond simply analyzing the physical object and delving into the knowledge, design choices, and problem-solving approaches that led to its creation. It's a deeper form of historical inquiry.
So once we have these traits, how do we actually trace the lineages? Are we looking at big macroevolutionary leaps like the invention of the printing press or the microevolutionary tweaks like a slightly faster chip each year?
We absolutely need to represent both to capture the full picture. Technological evolution often naturally focuses on distinct product categories like personal computers or automobiles. The initial product architecture, which is decided early in the design process, often sets the path for future development, creating path dependence, meaning later innovations are somewhat constrained by earlier design choices.
Stuck in a rut sometimes.
Can feel like it. We need to represent both macro and micro evolutionary events. Macroevolution involves radical innovations that fundamentally change the framework of a solution, like the invention of the printing press or the internet. These are major speciation events, creating entirely new branches.
Game changers.
Right. Microevolution, on the other hand, consists of incremental innovations that improve solutions within a given framework, such as annual car model improvements or software updates. A technophylogenetic tree needs to show both the major speciation events that create new categories, and the more subtle drift and refinement within existing lineages.
Could the branches show that? Like how long they are?
Potentially, yes. The branch lengths in such a tree could visually represent these periods longer length for rapid transformative change, maybe shorter ones for periods of incremental refinement. It's a way to visualize the pace of change.
It sounds like the tree isn't always a simple, neat branching structure. Especially with phenomena like technological convergence. You mentioned networks earlier.
You're hitting on a critical point that differentiates technological evolution from purely biological models. Technological evolution is profoundly shaped by phenomena that deviate from simple bifurcating tree structures. Technological convergence occurs when multiple technologies combine into one.
The smartphone being the classic example.
The smartphone is the quintessential example. Masterfully converging information and communication technology, computer networks, and multimedia capabilities into a single multifunctional platform. Historically, television converged the separate technologies of movies and radio. This process often leads to older single-function devices becoming obsolete as the converged device offers superior utility. Like, who buys just an MP3 player anymore?
Right, so it's like distinct lineages merging and fusing. That really challenges the traditional tree shape.
Absolutely. This is a common form of horizontal technology transfer or fusion, where distinct lineages merge to form a new, more complex one. It strongly suggests that a purely bifurcating tree-like structure might be insufficient. Network models allowing for converging branches might be more accurate for technophylogenetic trees.
And then there's parallel invention, where the same invention pops up independently by different people, sometimes around the same time, almost like the idea's time had come.
Yes. Parallel invention, also known as multiple discovery, describes instances where the same invention or discovery is made independently by multiple inventors around the same time. We mentioned the incandescent light bulb, integrated circuits, the jet engine, and the telephone, Gray and Bell. This phenomenon suggests that similar solutions can arise independently when the underlying scientific knowledge, technological capabilities, and societal needs converge. It means that a technophylogenetic tree might need to explicitly note instances of parallel invention, showing similar endpoints emerging from distinct starting points or from different intellectual lineages, moving beyond simple bifurcating models. This truly highlights that technological evolution is not a perfectly tree-like process. It's a dynamic, often messy web of interconnected innovation and discovery.
And finally, let's talk about the legal side of things. How does intellectual property, specifically patents, influence all this branching and diversification? It feels like an artificial but very powerful selection pressure, like putting up fences around ideas.
You're absolutely right, it is. The intellectual property system, particularly patents, plays a crucial and unique role in shaping technological lineages because it incentivizes innovation by granting temporary exclusive rights to inventors.
The monopoly period.
Right. This allows inventors to profit from their research and development investments and also facilitates technology diffusion through licensing. IP rights can influence the lineage and branching of technology in several ways. Firstly, by protecting novel inventions, patents allow new technological branches to develop without immediate imitation, thereby promoting diversification and the exploration of new design spaces. It gives a new idea the breathing room to establish itself.
So it essentially encourages new ideas to stand on their own and mature without being immediately copied and maybe crushed by bigger players.
Precisely. Secondly, the licensing of IP rights facilitates diffusion and thus recombination. It enables the spread of technology, allowing other firms to build upon existing inventions. This can lead to further variations and recombination of technological elements, fostering new hybrid designs and applications. So it's not just about protecting, it's also about strategically sharing to create new growth and cross-pollination.
But it can also create problems, right? Like patent thickets, where so many patents exist around a technology that it actually stifles further innovation.
That's the other side of the coin.
Exactly. Conversely, the misuse of patents, for instance, by patent trolls or aggregators who amass patents not for development but primarily for litigation, can create significant barriers to entry or innovation.
Right.
This potentially hinders the natural branching and diversification process by stifling competition or drastically increasing development costs. The influence of IP can be understood as an artificial selection pressure.
Artificial. Okay.
While market forces and user needs are often seen as natural selection pressures in technology, IP laws act as a distinct artificial selection pressure. They do not directly select for technical performance, but for legal exclusivity.
So the best tech doesn't always win if the legal landscape favors something else. That's possible. This exclusivity can temporarily protect less fit designs, perhaps less efficient or more expensive ones, or conversely, accelerate the dominance of a fit design by preventing direct competition. This influences which branches thrive or wither, sometimes independent of pure technical merit. In this sense, patents can be seen as a human invention designed to prevent or control drift in technological evolution by either protecting a specific lineage or channeling innovation in certain directions.
Wow.
This means that IP introduces a non-technical, legal economic layer to the selection process, potentially distorting or directing the natural course of technological evolution. Therefore, a truly comprehensive techno-phylogenetic tree should ideally account for this complex legal landscape and its profound impact on innovation trajectories. It adds another layer of complexity to the whole thing.
Now, for some real-world examples, this is where it gets really fun. We've talked a lot about the theory, but let's see how these principles play out in the captivating history of actual machines. Let's start with the computing device lineage, from the humble abacus all the way to modern AI. That's a huge sweep of history.
It truly offers a compelling illustration of lineage and branching. Its foundations stretch back to the dawn of calculation long before the scientific revolution, with early manual tools like the abacus. Then came the first mechanical calculating machines, like Blaise Pascal's Pascaline in 1642 and Gottfried Leibniz's stepped reckoner in the late 17th century. Clever mechanical stuff.
And Babbage, he feels like a key ancestor.
Oh, definitely. Later, in the 19th century, Charles Babbage, often called the father of the computer, designed his analytical engine, laying a fundamental framework for modern computers, with Ada Lovelace writing what's considered the first algorithm for it. Even Joseph Jacquard's loom, using punch cards for weaving patterns, provided a key conceptual precursor for programming the idea of stored instructions.
And then we move into what we typically think of as computer generations, right? Each one a significant branching point, a distinct step in the evolution, usually marked by a new core technology.
Exactly. The first generation, from roughly 1937 to 1946, was defined by massive room-sized machines using vacuum tubes for calculations like the electronic numerical integrator and calculator, or ENIAC.
The giants that filled buildings.
Literally. These were enormous, generated immense heat, required huge amounts of power, and were primarily used for specialized large-scale tasks like ballistics calculations during WWII. Think of them as the earliest, most cumbersome ancestors. Very niche.
So what came next, ushering in the second generation and a real shift? What killed the vacuum tube dominance?
The transistor. The second generation, from 1947 to 1962, was dramatically reshaped by the invention of the transistor at Bell Labs in 1947. This was a complete game changer.
How so?
It led to significantly smaller, more reliable, much faster, and much cheaper computers. They moved away from the heat and bulk and unreliability of vacuum tubes. This era also introduced magnetic tapes for data storage and saw the emergence of the first high-level programming languages like Fortran and COBOL, making them more accessible to programmers, not just hardware engineers. It was a critical divergence, propelling computing towards broader business and scientific applications.
And the third generation really changed how we interacted with computers, didn't it? That was a massive step towards user-friendliness. I'm thinking mice and Windows.
Indeed. The third generation, from 1963 to 1975, was driven by the integrated circuit, or IC, invented independently by Kilby and Noyce in 1958. putting multiple transistors on a single chip.
Miniaturization again.
Big time. These computers became even smaller, more powerful, and crucially capable of running multiple programs simultaneously, time-sharing. This era also saw a prototype of the graphical user interface, or GUI, demonstrated by Douglas Engelbart in his famous Mother of All Demos in 1968, though the report mentions a prototype in '64. This was a pivotal moment in human-computer interaction, enabling mouse-driven interfaces with windows and icons rather than just typing commands. This set the stage for a new branch focused squarely on user accessibility and interaction, even if it took a while to become mainstream.
And then we enter the era most of us recognize: personal computing, bringing a computer into every home, or at least onto every desk.
That's the fourth generation, from 1975 to roughly the present, though some argue we're past it. It's fundamentally defined by the microprocessor, the entire CPU on a single chip, invented by Intel in 1971. This enabled the advent of personal computers like the Apple IN2, the Commodore PT, and the IBM PC in 1981.
The revolution.
Truly. Key innovations included the floppy disk for storage, Ethernet in 1973 for networking, the World Wide Web launched by Tim Berners-Lee in 1990, making the internet usable, Wi-Fi standards emerging in the late 90s, and the truly transformative impact of smartphones like the iPhone in 2007, which converged computing, communication, and media in a pocket-sized device.
So a huge diversification.
Massive diversification. From mainframes and mini-computers into personal, desktop, and then highly mobile forms, driven by network connectivity, multi-touch interfaces, and vast app ecosystems.
And where are we headed now? What's the very tip of this evolutionary branch? AI, quantum.
We're arguably well into the fifth generation, present and beyond, characterized by artificial intelligence, machine learning, and explorations into entirely new paradigms like quantum computing and maybe even molecular or biological computing. The goal here is often to mimic human intelligence, enabling capabilities like natural language processing, voice, and facial recognition, and achieving unprecedented processing capabilities through quantum principles. It feels like another major branching point is happening right now.
It seems like throughout all these generations, there are powerful, recurring themes that consistently shape the evolution. Miniaturization smaller is better, increased performance faster is better, and user centricity easier is better. Those really jump out.
You've identified the fundamental drivers. What's truly fascinating is how consistent these selection pressures have been. There's a clear and persistent trend towards smaller size, lower cost, and higher performance across the entire lineage. Simultaneously, there's been a consistent shift from specialized, complex machines requiring expert operation to more user-friendly, accessible devices that anyone can pick up and use. The introduction of the GUI and the iPhone are prime examples where user-centered design didn't just lead to new products, but fundamentally reshaped entire branches of the computing lineage.
So those pressures guide the whole tree's shape.
They really do. These recurrent themes suggest fundamental selection pressures in technological evolution. The relentless pursuit of efficiency, affordability, and intuitive usability. A techno-phylogenetic tree of computing would not only show the technical lineage, but vividly illustrate how these pervasive pressures shape the branching patterns and the success or failure of various species.
Let's move to communication tools. This is another fascinating lineage, stretching even further back, from the earliest human symbols to the smartphones connecting us globally today.
Humanity's persistent drive to share information across time and distance provides an incredibly rich evolutionary story. Its origins trace back to the very emergence of spoken language, perhaps as early as 100,000 BCE, followed by early forms of visual symbols like the striking cave paintings found across the world, dating back around 30,000 BCE, and petroglyphs rock carvings around 10,000 BCE, ways to make ideas last.
And then writing systems. A profound branching point that changed everything. Suddenly, ideas could travel accurately without the person.
Absolutely profound. Early scripts like pictograms evolved into ideograms, eventually leading to the first logosyllabic writing systems such as cuneiform in Sumer around 3500 BCE and hieroglyphs in Egypt around 3100 BCE, complex systems. Then, a truly significant divergence occurred with the development of the first pure alphabets around 2000 BCE. Notably the Phoenician alphabet, which represented sounds instead of whole ideas, making it much more flexible and easier to learn. This was later adapted and spread by the Greeks.
And the tech to write with evolved too.
Oh, yeah. Innovations in writing technologies followed, from the development of papyrus and parchment, then paper, to the quill, the pencil, and of course the revolutionary printing press by Johannes Gutenberg in 1440 CE, which dramatically amplified information dissemination, making knowledge widely accessible, a massive accelerator.
So that's communication over time. What about over distance, communicating instantly? That's where telecommunication comes in.
Precisely. That began with early distant methods like smoke signals, drums, signal fires. Major branching points include pre-electric telecommunication methods like Claude Schaap's semaphore telegraph, which used towers with movable arms to send visual signals across France, invented in 1792. Clever system.
And then came the electric age, lightning-fast communication.
Right. Joseph Henry built an early electric telegraph in 1831, followed by Samuel Morse's development of Morse code and the first practical long-distance electric telegraph lines in the 1830s and 40s. Suddenly, messages could cross continents in minutes. Then, Alexander Graham Bell famously patented the functional telephone in 1876, transmitting voice directly, followed by later innovations like Almond Strauger's automatic telephone exchange, eliminating the need for human operators for local calls.
And recording sound itself, that was huge too.
A significant step for preserving and sharing sound was Thomas Edison's phonograph in 1877, enabling sound recording and playback, a whole new branch of media.
And then the airwaves, the birth of mass media as we know it, radio, TV.
Yes, a truly expansive branch. Guglielmo Marconi demonstrated radio waves for long-distance signal transmission in 1895, leading to the first public radio broadcast, often cited as KDKA in Pittsburgh in 1920, bringing news and entertainment directly into homes. Then John Logie Baird transmitted the first fuzzy television signal in 1925, adding visuals to sound and opening up mass communication over vast distances in a completely new way.
And then came the ultimate convergence, mobile phones and the internet. The communication tools we carry in our pockets today.
Indeed. The concept of cellular phones emerged from Bell Labs in 1947, but it took decades. The first public mobile phone call was made by Motorola's Martin Cooper in 1973, and the first commercially available handheld mobile phone, the Dynatac 8000X, the brick phone, arrived in 1983.
Wow, 1983. Seems so recent and so long ago.
Doesn't it? Key advancements included SMS messaging in 1992, the iPhone's transformative launch in 2007, which really defined the modern smartphone, and the continuous rollout of faster mobile networks like 3G, 4G, and now 5G.
And the internet side.
Simultaneously, computers fundamentally revolutionized communication. The ENIS in 1946, the ARPANET in 1969, laying the groundwork for the internet, and Tim Berners-Lee's World Wide Web in 1989, making global information instantly accessible via browsers. Email, first developed in the mid-1960s, and social networking services like 6degrees.com in 1997 and Facebook in 2004 further diversified communication channels, leading to entirely new forms of interaction, community, and, well, information sharing.
It's strikingly clear that the drive for speed, reach, and interactivity is a consistent, powerful theme across this entire lineage. Faster, further, more engaging.
What stands out here is that from the earliest smoke signals to today's smartphones, the progression consistently demonstrates a fundamental human desire for faster transmission, wider geographical reach, and increased interactivity and richness of information. Early symbols conveyed basic ideas, writing allowed for complex messages to be preserved, the telegraph and telephone enabled real-time distant communication, and the internet and smartphones converged these capabilities, adding multimedia and global instant interactivity. These fundamental human needs for communication, the drive for speed, the desire for broader reach, and the demand for richer, more interactive experiences, have acted as powerful, consistent selection pressures that have shaped the entire communication technology tree, leading to repeated innovation and diversification in these very specific directions. It's a testament to how our own human desires drive technological evolution.
Next, let's look at the transportation lineage. From simple rafts to cars and planes, how do these seemingly disparate forms of movement tell an evolutionary story, getting from A to B?
The history of transportation is another captivating series of transformative innovations driven by the persistent human need for mobility, trade, and exploration. Early forms included simple rafts and dugout canoes, evolving with the crucial introduction of sails around 3000 BCE, which harnessed wind power for water travel. A monumental leap for land travel was the invention of the wheel around 3500 BCE in Mesopotamia, which led to the development of carts, chariots, and eventually paved roads by the Romans.
And then things really sped up with engines.
Right. The Industrial Revolution brought further advancements with canals, steamships, and railroads, fundamentally transforming the landscape of how goods and people moved, shrinking the world.
Focusing on automobiles, Carl Benz is generally credited with the first true car. That must have been a huge branching point, the birth of the car species.
Absolutely. Carl Benz's Benz patent motor wagon in 1886 is widely considered the first true car powered by an internal combustion engine, marking the birth of a new lineage. Though there were earlier steam carriages and electric experiments. Henry Ford then revolutionized the industry with the Model T in 1908, making cars affordable through assembly line production. This was a critical branching point, democratizing personal mobility and initiating a massive expansion of the automotive family tree. Suddenly, it wasn't just for the rich.
And from that mass-produced ancestor, the innovations just kept coming, diversifying the lineage into countless forms we recognize today. Sedans, trucks, sports cars.
Indeed. Key innovations that led to diversification and vastly improved functionality and safety include the electric ignition system developed by Charles Kettering around 1911, making starting easier. Hydraulic brakes introduced by Duesenberg in 1918 for better stopping power. Automatic transmissions becoming common in the 1940s, power steering in 1951, factory-installed air conditioning in 1953, cruise control in 1958, and the modern three-point seatbelt pioneered as standard by Volvo in 1959.
Safety became a big driver.
Increasingly so. Later, anti-lock braking systems, ABS, became available in the 1970s, first patented much earlier, and airbags became common in the late 1980s. This technological progress led to distinct branches and sub-branches like the powerful American muscle cars of the 1950s-60s and the sleek European supercars of the 1960s-70s. More recently, the lineage branched significantly into electric vehicles, such as GM's ill-fated EV1 in 1996 and the commercially successful Tesla Roadster in 2008, and hybrid cars like the Toyota Prius launched in Japan in 1997 and globally in 2000. Alongside this, we saw the integration of digital technologies like GPS navigation becoming common around 2000 and Bluetooth connectivity in 2001 for enhanced user experience.
What about aircraft? It feels like a completely different branch of transportation, but still driven by similar needs for speed and reach, just up in the air.
It is a distinct yet parallel story of human ingenuity aiming for the skies. Early concepts of flight included kites, used in China, perhaps as early as 1000 BCE, and Leonardo da Vinci's visionary but unbuilt designs in the 15th century. Lighter-than-air flight began with the Montgolfier brothers' hot air balloon ascent in 1783, followed by hydrogen balloons and Ferdinand von Zeppelin's rigid airships in the early 20th century.
The Zeppelins?
Right. Heavier-than-air flight progressed more slowly, building on Sir George Cayley's foundational work on aerodynamics and his biplane design in 1843, and Otto Lilienthal's crucial glider experiments in the 1890s, which provided vital practical data but tragically cost him his life.
And then the Wright brothers.
The pivotal moment, of course, was the Wright brothers' first successful powered, sustained, and controlled flight at Kitty Hawk in 1903. That was the true speciation event for modern aircraft.
And from there, aviation just exploded into new forms and capabilities. Faster, higher, bigger.
Absolutely. Further branching led to the invention of the practical jet engine independently by Frank Whittle in the UK and Hans von Ohain in Germany in the 1930s, and the first operational jet-propelled aircraft, the German Heinkel He-178, flew in 1939.
Wow.
Subsequent developments included breaking the sound barrier with Chuck Yeager in 1947, the dawn of commercial jet airliners like the de Havilland Comet in 1952, and the iconic Boeing 707 in 1957, leading to the massive Boeing 747 jumbo jet in 1970, and niche branches like supersonic passenger transport with the Concorde entering service in 1976. The ongoing evolution includes exploring electric aircraft with initial short-haul flights in 2019 and even the ambitious concept of flying cars, with various prototypes emerging around 2011, though still far from mainstream.
So, we see this constant arms race of performance and safety across all transportation. Faster, further, safer, more efficient. It's a fundamental selection pressure, isn't it?
It's a strikingly consistent pattern across all transportation modalities. There's a continuous drive for increased speed, greater capacity, improved efficiency, and enhanced safety. Early vehicles focused on basic movement, like the wheel or the sail. Later, the advent of powerful engines brought unprecedented speed and range, which in turn necessitated radical innovations in safety, such as hydraulic brakes, seatbelts, and airbags. The persistent demand for efficiency, driven by economic and environmental concerns, has led to the development of hybrid and electric vehicles.
So one advance creates pressure for another.
Exactly. This constant push and pull between enhancing performance and ensuring safety and efficiency creates a dynamic evolutionary landscape. The techno-phylogenetic trees for transportation would therefore vividly show parallel developments and convergent solutions driven by these universal desires, illustrating a remarkable adaptive radiation within the transportation domain.
This last case study is particularly fascinating because it shows how a core mechanism, a single ancestral node, can diversify into thousands of different applications. Let's talk about electric motors and internal combustion engines in household appliances and beyond. These things are everywhere.
This truly demonstrates how a few fundamental principles can serve as incredibly deep ancestral nodes from which countless specialized applications branch out, creating entire kingdoms of machines. Take electric motors. The foundational understanding began with Hans Christian Ørsted's discovery of the magnetic field generated by electric currents in 1820, and André-Marie Ampere's work on electromagnets, including the solenoid, in the same year.
The basic physics.
Right. The first recognizable rotating electric motor was created by Moritz Jacobi in 1834. An early demonstration famously powered a small model car built by Siebrandus Strating and Christopher Becker in 1835. Thomas Davenport received the first U.S. patent for an electric motor intended for practical use in 1837.
And from that single origin, the diversification is just incredible, powering nearly everything we touch, often silently.
It truly is. From these origins, electric motors diversified into various types, including efficient DC motors, powerful three-phase synchronous motors used in robotics and modern electric cars, and robust, common three-phase cage induction motors used everywhere in industry. Their applications proliferated into a multitude of household appliances, becoming integral components. The compressor motors in refrigerators, the drum drives in washing machines, the suction fans and brush rollers and vacuum cleaners, the blades in blenders and food processors, pumps in dishwashers, fans and AC compressors, microwave turntables, tiny motors in electric toothbrushes and hair dryers, and garage door openers.
Each one a little branch off the main motor trunk.
Exactly. Each application represents a highly specialized branch from that core electric motor principle, adapted to specific needs for power, size, speed control, and environment.
It's the same story with internal combustion engines, right? One core principle controlled explosions, pushing pistons, hundreds of applications, from lawnmowers to giant ship engines to jets.
Exactly. Early prototypes include the Piriola 4 by the Niepce brothers in 1807, which used lycopodium powder as fuel, and successfully powered a boat on the Saône River. The Lenoir gas engine in 1859 marked a significant step towards practicality, finding early applications in driving industrial equipment like printing presses.
But getting it small enough for a vehicle was key.
Yes, Gottlieb Daimler and Wilhelm Maybach were instrumental in developing small, fast-running ICEs specifically for vehicles, leading to their precursor of the motorcycle in 1885, and the first recognized four-wheeled automobile independently developed by Daimler and Benz in 1886. Beyond road vehicles, ICEs diversified into other major applications. They are the fundamental principle behind gas turbines, which power jet engines, and even most large rocket engines use controlled combustion principles. They are used in airplanes as auxiliary power units, APUs. Helicopters use turboshaft engines, a type of gas turbine. Some unmanned aerial vehicles use compact Wankel rotary engines, and they dominate across various marine propulsion and auxiliary generator systems.
So it's not just electric motors and internal combustion engines. It sounds like even more fundamental concepts like the lever and the wheel and axle. Simple machines act as ancient common ancestors for entire kingdoms of machines, things we learned about in elementary school physics.
That's a profound conclusion from this perspective. It demonstrates how underlying physical principles are the most ancient common ancestors, giving rise to entire kingdoms of machines. Think of how many things rely on a lever or a wheel.
Mind-boggling.
Techno-phylogenetic trees can therefore be constructed at different levels of abstraction. From broad principle trees that show how electromagnetism led to countless motor types, or how thermodynamics led to various engines, all the way down to highly specific product trees that detail the evolution of, say, a particular washing machine model or a specific family of microprocessors. This multi-level approach allows us to see how a few fundamental ideas cascade into an immense diversity of technological solutions, highlighting the deep, interconnected evolutionary history embedded in our everyday objects.
We've taken a deep dive into so much fascinating detail today. I mean, tracing computers back to looms and phones back to smoke signals. So what's the big payoff? What do we actually learn from applying this phylogenetic lens to technology? It feels like we're unlocking the secret code of innovation, not just reorganizing history.
It truly offers several profound understandings, far beyond mere categorization or just drawing pretty trees. Firstly, it allows us to better understand innovation trajectories. This approach provides a structured, visual way to see how innovations build upon previous designs, enabling the identification of both ancestral features that are retained and newly derived features that mark a change.
So you can see the inheritance clearly.
Exactly. This perspective helps in discerning patterns of incremental versus radical innovation. It shows how continuous, small improvements within an existing paradigm, like making chips slightly faster each year, can eventually lead to the exhaustion of a technology's performance potential, hitting physical or economic limits. Yep. And this exhaustion creates intense pressure for discontinuous, radical shifts that establish entirely new lineages using fundamentally different principles. In essence, we can start to potentially see when a technology might hit a wall, and a truly disruptive breakthrough might be needed, or is perhaps imminent.
So it can highlight when a technology might be hitting its limits and when a new radical idea is likely to emerge. That's incredibly powerful for foresight. Predicting the next big thing, maybe?
Potentially, yes, or at least understanding the conditions under which it might arise. Secondly, it's invaluable for identifying core technologies. This framework clearly highlights fundamental technologies such as the electric motor, the internal combustion engine, or even basic mechanical principles like the lever and wheel that serve as deep common ancestors for an incredibly diverse range of applications. This approach effectively reveals the foundational elements upon which vast technological kingdoms are built, showing their widespread influence across seemingly unrelated devices. It helps see the forest for the trees, so to speak.
And it clearly shows how sometimes the same idea pops up independently in different places, or how different technologies can combine into something entirely new. The parallel invention and convergence stuff.
Yes, it's excellent for revealing convergent evolution and parallel invention. The phylogenetic approach vividly illustrates how similar solutions can arise independently from different starting points, as we saw with the light bulb or jet engine. It also clearly demonstrates how distinct technological lineages can merge to create new, hybrid forms, like the smartphone. This provides invaluable perspectives on universal design challenges and the diverse pathways to their solutions, often revealing that great minds faced with similar problems and similar enabling technologies sometimes arrive at similar answers independently.
And the design itself, the look and feel.
And finally, it's powerful for mapping design influences. It facilitates tracing the inheritance of specific design principles, functional elements, and even aesthetic styles across various product generations and categories, demonstrating how successful design genes, maybe a particular user interface element or an ergonomic shape, are retained and recombined over time, shaping the look and feel of our world.
So beyond just understanding the past, are there...
By identifying exhausted technological potentials within existing lineages where incremental improvements are yielding diminishing returns, or by recognizing emerging convergent trends where different technologies are merging, this approach could help anticipate future innovation directions. It can highlight areas ripe for radical disruption or predict the next major speciation event in a technological domain. Imagine seeing the next iPhone coming. Not just a new phone model, but a new category of device based on converging trends.
That's incredibly powerful for businesses and researchers trying to stay ahead. What else can it do? Seems like it could be useful in education, too.
Definitely. It has profound implications for design history and education. This framework provides a compelling visual and analytical tool for teaching the history of technology, illustrating the interconnectedness of inventions rather than presenting them as isolated breakthroughs in a timeline. It can also inform user-centered design practices by mapping how continuous adaptation to changing user needs drives the evolution of products and interfaces over time.
And the legal angle we talked about, IP.
And it's highly relevant for intellectual property, IP strategy. Understanding the lineage of patented features can offer strategic advantages. It can inform challenges of patent validity by identifying prior art within a technological family tree, reveal potential infringement by tracing the inheritance of specific design elements, or highlight opportunities for licensing and cross-licensing agreements between different branches. Furthermore, it could help visualize and navigate patent thickets that might hinder innovation in specific branches of a technological tree.
And understanding the competition.
Finally, yes, it can be used in market analysis by mapping how different firms' product lineages compete, diverge, or converge over time. This provides a deeper, more dynamic understanding of competitive landscapes and potential areas for market entry, strategic alliances, or even predicting competitor moves. It truly transforms the way we look at technological strategy and history.
This has been an incredibly insightful discussion, mapping out this whole evolutionary view of technology. But as with any powerful analogy, it's never a perfect one-to-one translation. We've touched on this, but let's really dig into the limitations. So it's a powerful metaphor, a way to frame our thinking, but not a perfect scientific formula that we can just plug data into and get a flawless prediction, right?
Exactly. That's a crucial point to emphasize. This highlights an important question. While the analogy is incredibly valuable for conceptual understanding and analysis, it requires us to be constantly mindful of its unique complexities. We're not just mapping technical specifications. We're dealing with human choices, market forces, and profound societal needs. It's a powerful lens, but certainly not a rigid, all-encompassing formula.
And the biggest crack is that human intention piece.
The most fundamental difference, as we discussed, is intentionality versus blindness. Biological evolution is driven by blind processes of natural selection acting on random mutations. Technical artifacts, however, are the direct result of the purposive intelligence of designers. Technological evolution is not blind. Variations are often deliberate, goal-oriented, and shaped by foresight. This requires a nuanced application of phylogenetic principles, recognizing that human agency doesn't invalidate these processes, but rather shapes their mechanisms of variation and selection in ways biology doesn't see.
And we talked about horizontal transfer being so much more common and direct in technology, copying, licensing, reverse engineering. That must be a huge limitation for a simple tree structure.
It is indeed. Horizontal transfer and recombination are far more common and rapid in technology through licensing, reverse engineering, modularity in design, or simply designers observing competitors than they are in biology, especially complex multicellular life. This direct and prevalent sharing across lineages makes a purely bifurcating tree-like structure less accurate or even misleading for many tech histories. Network models, which allow for merging branches and complex interconnections, are often more appropriate to represent this intricate intermingling of ideas and components. The tree becomes a tangled web.
And then there's the ongoing challenge of just defining what you're even looking at. What constitutes a distinct species of machine? Or what counts as a trait? Is a feature like touchscreen one trait? Or is it composed of many smaller traits?
Yes, defining species and traits remains inherently complex and subjective. Consistently defining the units of analysis, whether you're looking at abstract techniques, concrete artifacts, or the firms that produce them, and their heritable traits can significantly alter the resulting tree. Traits can be functional, structural, material, aesthetic, or even abstract principles, and the careful selection and definition of these traits fundamentally impacts the tree's outcome and its explanatory power. This is where the art meets the science, and different choices lead to different insights or maybe different biases.
And just the sheer amount of data must be overwhelming if you try to trace every single part, every line of code.
Absolutely. Data availability and granularity is a major practical hurdle for any comprehensive analysis. Tracing the full lineage of every minute component, every circuit, or every line of software code would be an impossible task due to the sheer volume and often proprietary nature of the data. You often can't get inside the black box.
So you have to simplify.
You have to. The level of detail must be carefully chosen based on the analytical objective. While patent data offers some valuable insights into innovation trajectories, it is not exhaustive and may not capture all forms of technological evolution, especially informal knowledge sharing or trade secrets.
And the idea that technology is really knowledge stored in artifacts means we're not just tracing physical objects, but ideas which are harder to pin down.
That's a crucial point. Technology is fundamentally knowledge predominantly stored in artifacts. While physical artifacts are tangible and observable, tracing the evolution of the underlying knowledge, the abstract ideas, and the problem-solving approaches that they embody is considerably more challenging than simply tracking physical objects. This requires a deeper, more conceptual form of historical and design analysis.
Are there also potential misinterpretations, like in biology, where sometimes things look related but aren't, due to how fast they change, that long branch attraction thing?
Potentially, yes. In biological phylogenetics, there's a known phenomenon called long branch attraction, where rapidly evolving lineages can be incorrectly inferred as closely related simply because they have accumulated many changes independently, making them look similar by chance rather than due to true descent from a recent common ancestor.
Uh-huh.
A similar phenomenon could conceivably occur in technology, where periods of rapid innovation or significant disruptive design shifts might obscure true ancestral links, potentially leading to misleading phylogenetic reconstructions if you're not careful with the methods. We need to be keenly aware of such interpretive pitfalls when analyzing technological data.
And finally, technology isn't just about the tech itself. It's deeply interwoven with society, economics, and human perception. You can't separate it out easily.
Precisely. Social and economic factors play a much larger and more direct role in technological evolution than in purely biological evolution. Technological development is heavily influenced by a complex interplay of non-technical factors, including economics, user perception, market dynamics, and broader social and political structures. These external pressures are incredibly difficult to represent accurately on a simple tree diagram and necessitate multidimensional analytical approaches.
So the tree is just one dimension of the story.
Exactly. Some scholars even argue that technological change is, above all, a social phenomenon, and that its categories are too imprecise and contextual to be represented realistically by a computable algorithm. This suggests that while the analogy is an incredibly powerful metaphor for understanding, it may not translate into a perfectly mechanistic or purely computable scientific model. It's a lens that adds richness, but also demands a holistic perspective, acknowledging all the messy human stuff involved. #outro us.
Wow. It's like we've taken a deep dive into the very DNA of our machines today, seeing how they've branched, adapted, inherited ideas, and even merged over time. It completely transforms how we think about innovation, moving from a simple linear view of progress to something far more organic and interconnected, a grand unfolding story of human ingenuity.
What's truly fascinating here is how this perspective encourages us to view machines not as these isolated inventions that just appear out of nowhere, but as interconnected descendants in a grand, evolving lineage of human problem solving. It connects the toaster to the telegraph in some weird, distant way.
Yeah.
And this raises an important question for you, the listener. What technological family tree are you most curious to explore next? Where do you see these patterns playing out?
I invite you to take a moment and think about a technology you use daily, perhaps something as common as your toaster, the remote control for your TV, or even your car key fob. Seriously, pick one. Consider its deep ancestral nodes. What were the fundamental principles? Maybe electricity, maybe simple mechanics that had to be understood before it could even exist. How did it branch and diversify over generations from earlier forms? What are the traits, functional design, technical it shares with other, perhaps unexpected machines? And what societal or market pressures might have driven its evolution and shaped its current form?
Yeah, why does it look that way?
Exactly. By doing so, you can begin to see the profound evolutionary story embedded in these everyday objects, realizing that even the simplest device has a rich and complex lineage, a testament to centuries of human ingenuity and adaptive design, all connected in this vast technological web. Thanks for joining us on The Deep Dive.